So let us get to know the principles of MLOps. Now, this is something which I purposely did not discuss last time because the principles is exactly that link it up with the live implementation that we'll see today. So Azure is the platform that we used last time to just show the deployment of a model in production. Today, I'll actually show you the CI/CD pipeline, but how is it linked with the principles of MLOps? Please remember, MLOps is a concept. MLOps is basically a series of events which come together and form a concept. Okay, how we do it, what platform we use can be any cloud platform. We'll be showing it using Azure today. Okay, let's get to know the principles. The first principle, automation. It will allow you to automate the entire end-to-end process. You'll have the scripts written, everything will be written from your end. It could be in your local system, it could be in your GitHub repository, it could be in Azure repository. There are so many different ways you can connect it. Once you connect it, you don't need to rewrite, or you don't need to start from scratch, to be honest. Okay, you have a particular problem statement given to you, and that's how the entire system revolves around this concept. Okay, how it happens when we see the implementation, we'll see that. The practices that it promotes, we are already aware of CI/CD. It's more of like a colloquial that's used with DevOps. For those who don't know, I'll just revise. So CI and CD is like continuous integration and continuous delivery, which is continuous deployment. Integration is the part wherein you do the testing and evaluation. Deployment is when you put it up on on a platform, basically, for the user to use. Okay, so when I am talking about, again, I'll go back to the previous example. If I'm comparing CricBuzz with the ESPN app, okay, CricBuzz has a lot of features which probably ESPN does not have. So then ESPN will try to come up with will come up with those features and a couple of more features. So this continuous experimentation is the CI thing that we can see over here on our screen, the continuous integration part. And then you change your code, you add few features, you remove bugs. Once that is done, you straight away put it in production one more time. That's the continuous delivery. Now this is done by DevOps. What extra do you need for machine learning? You need a continuous training and continuous monitoring. I had given a nice example last time. I'll do that again when we move to that part of the slide as to why we need continuous monitoring or continuous training. Okay, so I think I'll explain this better when we have that slide coming up. The next part is versioning. Like I said, whenever we have a particular model which is up on the cloud platform and that is being used by a particular organization to make predictions or to make certain, it could be a regression based task, it could be a classification based task, whatever it is. Whenever this is being done, they need to know which version of this model is working best. Now, there are two reasons behind it. Let us go step by step. Number one, I come up with a particular model. Say today we'll be using decision tree classifier. So let me stick to that. So decision tree classifier is what I have used, and I've created a certain version of this classifier. Okay, and that is going really well. And then due to some reason, which I'll explain in the next slide, the model starts performing really poor. There is something that is going wrong with the model. So obviously I have to change some, maybe I'll have to change some hyperparameters. Maybe I'll have to replace decision tree classifier with maybe a random forest classifier because I need an ensemble technique to carry out the prediction, the classification task, whatever it is. The model that I have now is said to be better than the previous model. And this is the second version of that particular model. Okay, it's a newer version. It's the latest version. How many times have we heard this since our childhood? The latest version where a mobile aaya hai. What is that basically? So the versioning is basically that upgradation with time. This upgradation with time is something that MLOps will allow you to do. Now, is it always important for you to have the latest version? No. Think about it like this. You have the latest version, but there is a massive bug that's been detected, and it's very difficult to get rid of that bug, because if you want to get rid of that bug, a lot of parameters need to be changed. It will take at least 2 days for your team to get that done. What do you do in such cases? Do you shut down your business? It's like Saturday, Sunday, party, holiday. No, you don't do that. You go back to a previous version. You go back to, this was probably version 8. You go back to version 7. Because version 7, although was having some issues with the model performance, it was giving some output. At least for 2 days, you could push it in production, and you could, send in a message that this is a rough idea. You could just, that's like few lines of scripting on the front end, and you could say that this is a rough idea. This is not this is an approximate idea of the, prediction that is being given. Just a matter of 2 days, your work will not stop. That is how versioning is done in MLOps. It helps you to keep a version or keep a track of each model that you've made, and anytime there is a bug, you don't not only need to go forward, you can fall back as well. That's like a backup for you. Okay. Obviously, it's needless to say that there will be continuous testing. We can conduct smoke tests. We can conduct, the endpoint has to be, the endpoint has to give you a proper result. All that will be done by MLOps. So the testing happens parallelly, like I said, continuous evaluation, the CI pipeline, this continuous integration pipeline lets you to, conduct tests, and these test results are always yielded as, test artifacts. So these are like the results of the test. I'm going to be showing all of that when I do the CI pipeline implementation, when I show it. Okay. The next part is probably like the most important principle of MLOps. It basically helps you to monitor. Okay. Monitoring, what is monitoring and why do I need model monitoring? Okay. What is the purpose behind it? What is the reason behind it? Why do I need to monitor? For those who've done basic data science projects, I'm sure you guys know, you guys take a data set, you clean the data set. First, you observe the data set, of course, then you clean the data set. Once the data set is cleaned, you then, get a proper data set, but now it's not feature selected. So you select certain features. There are 12 columns, you bring it down to 10. Okay, so there's one target variable, and there are, say, 9 input variables. Okay, so that's like feature selection, and now you have a feature generated data. Then you split it into train and test, and all that is being done. When that is done, you train your model on the train data, and the testing is done on the testing data. Once that is done, you see that the accuracy is 94%. You're very happy with this model. That's amazing. This algorithm is going really well. The hyperparameters are amazing. 94, 95% is kind of satisfactory. Okay. Once I put this up, okay, once I deploy this, why do I again need to bother about the performance of the model? Why do I again need to bother about the performance of the model? This is where the next slide comes in. This is where the monitoring comes in. Okay, why do I need to monitor? I had explained this kind of in detail in the previous session. I'm more than happy to do it one more time. Okay. So this is basically a simple two-dimensional graph that I have in front of you. Okay, it's called the ML model decay monitoring. Okay, that's happening through MLOps. What is it doing exactly? Okay, now there is a certain parameter, a metric that I use to analyze the performance of my model. Okay, it's called the F1 measure. It's an F1 score. It's the harmonic mean of your precision and recall, and then accordingly you can determine the accuracy of the model. Now, one fine day you've been given a task, okay, in the month of August. Okay, it's already August. This is a very good example now. Thank God. Anyway, so it's the month of August, and you have been given a task. You have been given a particular problem statement, and they've said that you can't just do it in your local system on Jupyter Notebook. Okay, fine. You use it. Once the model is trained and everything, please give us all the artifacts, all the results of this experiment that you conduct. Give us the test scores. Give us the model as a PKL file. Give us the everything. Like give us the code, of course, and give us the data that you've trained it on, and then we'll be putting it up, putting into production. In the month of August, and it's a very diverse data set. It's a very, very diverse data set, and it's very difficult to get very high, F1 measure, like the high accuracy for this particular model in the month of August. So you got a near about 80%. Let's call this 78%. You got a 78% accurate model, and you provided it with them, and they took it and they put it up on, they put it in production. Then the front end team did a wonderful front end, coding, and they developed it, and then they pushed it in production. Fine, it's there. When time proceeds, gradually with time, you're seeing that the performance of this model is degrading. Its accuracy score comes down to 70% by the end of August. Around September, it's somewhere around 63, 62%. By the time October comes in, it goes below 55%. Okay, it goes below 55%. Now your company, the organization you work with, they have set a threshold that we will not work with any algorithm which has a accuracy of less than 55%. What do? MLOps allows you to again work with this model, okay, and create a new version of this model in October. Okay, pardon? You already had the first version. You did not have the first version. You had the fundamental model. When you put it in production, you're seeing that gradually the performance is deteriorating with time. And then the threshold of 55% has been hit. You can't go below that. So in October, you work with it again and you create the V1. This was the version V. Let's call this V1. Okay, or let's say this was V0. This new version is V1, and this new version model straight away hits 96%. In October, in August, the model which could not even touch 80% has now gone to 96%. That's something, that's kind of a miracle. How did that happen? The problem that created this degradation is actually the thing which actually helped you to reach this 96%. I'll tell you how that happened. Okay. Moving on, you see that it performed really well for first 2-3 weeks, but again from the middle of October, around November, it's started to degrade. It started to degrade around November. It's somewhere between 80, like towards the late 70s. Again around December, like it's not even hit December and it's fallen below the threshold, which is 55%. Again, you work on it and you create a new version of this model, and then the same cycle repeats. Okay, each time you train it, ideally you will see that its score is either better than the previous one or equal to it. There could be cases when it's less than the previous one also, but it's at least better than what it was. It's better. It's definitely going to cross your threshold by a great margin. Okay. Now, what is this? What is this all about? Like, what is exactly happening, which is creating this problem? Here's what it is. Think of it like this. I had given a cricket-oriented example last time. I'll probably give another cricket-oriented example. So think of it like this. You are a fast bowler. Okay, you are a fast bowler, and you have joined a particular cricket coaching class. Okay, and your trainer is the best fast bowler in the country. Okay, you're a fast bowler. You have amazing talent, but your trainer needs to nurture you and train you properly, and only then your coach, basically your coach, is going to train you, and then he's going to make you the best fast bowler. Okay, you become one of the finest fast bowlers in the junior team. Then you go to your district, the city team, then the state team. Then you keep growing. You play Ranji, and one fine day you make it to the Indian national team. Okay, now you are out there in the real world facing the legendary batsman. Okay, everything that your trainer, your coach taught you, you are using it to the fullest potential, and you are getting, like, you are the highest wicket taker of the first series that you play in. All the batsmen are not able to judge your bowling at all. Okay, now the first two games, the first two series that you played in, you did really well. Suddenly your performance drops. The batsmen are identifying you. The batsmen are kind of, being able to figure out your bowling style, your different variations with the ball. They're trying to, they cracked your secret, if I want to put it in layman's term. Okay, what does your coach do? Your coach comes up with new strategies. He says that use a slow short ball that can surprise a batsman. Use the knuckle ball. Use if you're a spinner, you could say that use a carom ball. There are different versions. There are so many different types. So depending on how the batsman has changed his performance or his style or his approach towards you, you have been trained by your coach. Then when you go to play the next series, you are again doing really well. Okay, you're doing really well. You've again become the highest run scorer of this particular series. You've developed a very good knuckle slower ball, which is a Yorker. Okay, you're bowling the one of the world's finest slower balls, which is a Yorker, which is going to hit. It's almost like a full toss, but it's a slower ball. Suddenly, the batsman starts following AB de Villiers and Tilakaratne Dilshan. They're like very popular cricketers. वो जो पीछे मारने वाला shot होता है ना, the dill scoop. They bend down and they hit it behind the wicket keeper's head. They started playing that. They started using that for your knuckleball. Again, you need to come up with a new strategy to counter that. What is happening? This bowler was trained so well and he did so well in his Ranji team, in his school team, everywhere. He was like the king of all the bowlers. The moment he was deployed and the moment he came into production, the model is not performing well. And now we're back to machine learning, guys. This is how the data change is actually going to change the requirements of the model. Now let me relate it with data. Think about it like this. We are in a real world wherein like 3 months back, okay, now this is dedicated to all the participants who are here right now. I'm sure you guys will be able to resonate with me. 3 months back, when you would click on the YouTube app on your mobile, which were the recommendations which that would pop up? Compare it with today. Like after this live session, just go to YouTube, click on YouTube and see, look at the recommendations. It's never going to be the same. Every week, something new has come up, some new topic. Somebody who used to watch a lot of cricket videos after the Euros got over started watching a lot of football videos. Somebody who watches a lot of comedy videos has started watching Sadhguru videos. And there are so many different types, so many change in behavior of the people who are the consumer. That leads to change in data. This change that you're seeing is precisely or primarily due to the change in data. The data is changing. The previous data on which you had trained your model was like performing like 93, 94%. The moment you put it in production, the data suddenly changed over these months and then the performance degraded. Again, it was, trained on the new data, and based on the new data, it got a much better score. Again, when it was deployed, the performance dropped. So this continuously happens. This is one of the reasons. I'm not saying data drift is the only concept. There could be model drift. There could be a problem with a sensor. Like think of it like this: like there is a particular sensor which reads the temperatures for you. You look at the temperature and accordingly you make some predictions. The model. What if the sensor is broken, or the sensor is damaged? What if the transducer is broken? What if the transducer is damaged? There are so many. Like a wireless, wireless network has so many different components, right? Any one of them can break down, and then the entire machine learning model will suffer because of that. So one of the reasons is data drift. Actually, one of the primary reasons is data drift. So data drift is nothing but change in the behavior of data because of which the model suffers, if I want to put it in layman's language. One more example could be COVID. Like think of the air quality index. I'd given this example last time also. Based on last 19 years of data, from 2000 till 2019, a particular person has made a model which predicts the air quality index of a particular city. Okay, like say Mumbai. Now this city is expected to be, it's kind of highly populated. There are a lot of vehicles, so it's supposed to be very polluted. Okay, so the machine is trained to detect this high amount of air quality, the AQI value. But what happened in 2020 March? There was a lockdown. By 2020 July, there were like hardly any vehicles that were out, right? So what happened as a result of that? The pollution level got better. The AQI, the air quality index, actually became better. As a result of it, the model which was predicting air quality index based on previous years does not even know what COVID is, because the machine is not rational like humans, right? That is why its performance might have degraded. So this is one more example. So the best part about MLOps is that it lets you, by using these concepts, you can actually understand the monitoring part. Okay, how it is monitored. Fine. Again, coming back to this last bit, the F1 score goes below the threshold. The threshold is denoted by the symbol tau. And then, sort of the moment it goes below tau, you have to retrain it and then push it back into production. So that is the CT and CM that we saw here. If you come back to the previous slide, you can see continuous training and continuous monitoring is happening, right? Because the previous model will be there. Like I said, versioning lets you to keep the previous model, but the new model is required because you need to redeploy it based on the new change in data or some problem that may have arisen in the source that is there. Okay, and the same is done using monitoring. Fine. Now that the principles are out of the way,